Hey guys, I'm going to talk about the Kizer T1. Now this is a very, very good knife and it excites me greatly. I'll go into the specs of it first and I'll do some size comparisons. I'll probably just put up an image right now of the specs on the screen. I always find that's easiest, but to illustrate sort of how big it is in a real world sense, I'll go and present you with it some other knives. So first of all, this is it closed next to a Swiss Army knife, standard size. And this is it open from sort of blade pivot to blade pivot matched up as best I can. This is it next to the Cold Steel American Lawman, which is more or less the same size as the T1. And now closed next to the Lawman has a bit of a bigger footprint compared to the T1. The T1, whilst being about the same size open, is just generally smaller overall in terms of in your pocket size. This is next to the Kizer Gemini closed, and next to the Kizer Gemini open, next to the Zero Tolerance 0220 open, and next to the Zero Tolerance 0220 closed, and some Spydercos next to the Spyderco Police 4 and the Spyderco Spidey Chef closed, and those knives all lined up and open. So it's definitely a good sort of sweet spot size in my opinion. Big enough not to feel like a really small knife, but still small enough not to feel, perhaps a bit too, unwieldy like some of these knives can sometimes feel in certain situations. Here's all those blades lined up together. Sorry about the fidgety Swiss Army knife. I need to hold that one or else it flops over. So you can see the spine thicknesses of the Kizer Gemini, the Spidey Chef, the 0220, this is the Kizer TI in the middle, and the Spyderco Police, the American Lawman, and a Swiss Army knife. So the Swiss Army knife is the thinnest, and then you've really got a pretty rough grip with perhaps the next thinnest being the Police, and then really these three knives here, the Spidey Chef, the Gemini, and the T1, all being about the same thickness with the American Lawman at the spine anyway, and the 0220 being the thicker knives out of the two. So the Lawman is the next thickest, and the thickest knife is obviously the 0220 there. Of course, grind does make a difference. The American Lawman does have a rather nice sort of flat grind that goes down to a very thin edge, and they all have actually pretty good grinds, all these blades here. So just a point of reference though in terms of how thick the blade is. Alright, so this blade is designed by a chap called Uli Henneke, and it's from a different background to me, so they often say and pronounce words differently, so I'm apologetic if I have butchered that, but I'm sure you understand. What you get is a frame-locking titanium handled knife that operates via thumb stud, not by flipper, and it has some machine work done on the titanium handle. It has some rough profiling to fit the human hand, which is good. It has a lanyard hole integrated into the titanium backspacer there. It has a titanium it's a shaped, but it's also a sprung clip. So it's not a super stiff clip. It does have some spring tension to it, but it is sprung from this height rather than from when they're sprung from, say, I don't know, that's sort of sprung, I guess, from the same height, but just a little bit different to your standard sort of wire clip. But then, sort of has that element of feeling a little bit more classy, or at least more tailored to the knife, because it definitely is in line with the rest of the knives. Design sort of thing. It mirrors the swoops and the swooshes that are being put in there very, very purposefully by the knife designer. So then you get a very basic drop point blade that is an S35 VN steel. You get a sharpening choil on that knife, or a little ricasso at the very least. You get dual thumb studs. You get Kizer's brand on this side, as well as the model number 3490 and the steel. And then you get Uli Henneke's branding there, and then the number of the knife, or the name of the knife, the T1. The knife's kind of got a stonewashed and then polished feel. It has some reflectivity to it, but not a huge amount. Sort of a bit similar to the finish of some Sebenzas, perhaps the Spyderco Sleesh Bowie as well, Bowie, or however you say that. So there we are. The frame lock has a stainless steel insert, just a very small one that you can remove via those two Torx bits. The whole thing comes apart with number 9 Torxes, which is cool. And then it's got Kizer's pretty standard, it's different color here, pretty standard pivot there, which is a little bit raised, but it's sort of got that little fashionable, trendy little, designed swirl there as well. So there you go. So Kizer knives have really been impressing me lately. They put out pretty economical designs. So, the prices are about probably $50 to $60 less than, say, a zero tolerance knife. I guess, and the trade-off being that it is made in China, not America. If you're an American, as we all do with our home countries, like to support our homegrown things. But so without the American made, you're generally getting very similar materials to sort of your average zero tolerance knife, as in stainless steel, S35, VN, ball bearings, and that sort of thing. And that is interesting about this knife. It is a ball bearinged thumb stud opening knife. So it does mean for very smooth opening. So what I'm going to do is I'll get into what I like and what I don't like so much about the knife, but I will not dick you around. This is a highly positive review of one of the best new knives of the year, if not the best new knife I've handled all year. It is that good. I really, really enjoy it. So first and foremost, the best thing about this knife is that blade. This blade looks very basic. It looks very much like, many, many other blades getting around there, just unremarkable shape. Sort of there's the American Lawman blade, very, very similar actually. Yeah. Getting towards being fairly identical. The Lawman is a great cutting blade as well. This one is even better. You can probably see, giving it away, is this lighter area here is the grind, where they've very, very skillfully removed material, bringing it down to a very, very, so you can see how deep it is there, a very sharp cutting edge. So not only did it come with a pretty good factory edge, not amazing, but still hair shaving, it is impeccably ground behind that edge. So as good as a factory edge can be, it's not worth as much if the architecture isn't there behind it to ensure that it's going to cut very well for a long, long time. And I know I've been probably overusing the saying thin or thick behind the edge, but this knife truly is thin behind the edge. Absolutely. It is very, very, you pinch it there and you can just feel it compared to even compared to the American Lawman. The American Lawman is thin immediately behind the edge. This is thin for a good few millimeters back. Until about there, it is very, very thin, and it makes for being an excellent slicer. So I've cut all manner of materials with this knife, and it cuts through them all like a laser. It is really, really pleasing to find a knife that is made just for cutting stuff thin. It was part of my love of the Spyderco Police. Here it is again. Although this isn't particularly a revolutionary design, it's a knife just made purely by virtue of being ground really, really well, using good steel from a good thin stock. A knife made for cutting things well, cutting things cleanly and finely. So really, really well done. Cutting edge, cutting blade. Great shape of the blade as well. See how it's got a nice, very subtle drop point here, which still leads to a nice acute tip, but it's not frail by any means at all. It's still got a fair bit of material right behind it. Very, very well done in all senses. There is nothing wrong with this blade. It's probably one of the best blades I've used all year. Very, very well done, Kizer. The handle design is good. It is a good handle for a couple of reasons, both by virtue of being, stylistically designed. So you can see here, the handle has this milled out portion here, which then continues on. It's in line with this flat portion of the grind here. Very, very nice kind of continuation going through there. So that is good in terms of a design sense. It's got a relative amount of space in there as well, so it's easy to clean rather than being backspaced up to here. It does have a backspacer, which isn't the end of the world, but compared to, say, a lockback knife where you need to sort of clean out a channel, if stuff gets scooped in there, you have to really dig it out. I do prefer this form of construction, so really, really good in terms of that, and also just in terms of being a very handleable knife. Very, very comfortable in hand, no hot spots, nothing weird like that at all. It's got a great feeling in the, with the knife closed in your hand. It's got a good feeling when it's open. Your hand just fits there quite effortlessly. It isn't the world's most comfortable knife, it's still not up with like an LT Wright broomstick handle or anything crazy good like that, but on a folding knife, it is getting towards about as good as you would want. It's, one of the more ergonomic folding knife handles I've had recently is the 0220 handle. Maybe it's not quite as good as that. I do like the sort of downward cant of this knife a little bit more than this one has. It's a bit more subtle on this one, but still excellent, excellent. Good enough to use for long repetitive tasks without the knife getting annoying. So really well done handle as well. The action of the knife, it's very, very good because it is on bearings, so it flies open with authority. Even from when you first get the blade, you tighten the pivot all the way down, it still flies open. It's got a pretty strong detent, but not so strong that it's frustrating to overcome. Knife is fun to flick and fly open, and it just goes to show not every knife in the world needs to be a flipper. As fun as flippers are, any sort of good opening, as long as it's well thought out and smoothly done, can be as fun as doing that. Really, I'm not sure why we all decided this was more fun than doing this, but there you go. This is a really, really nice knife to use and play with on the couch and do all that knife guy stuff that drives our wives crazy. The fit and finish on this is classic Kizer. Kizer, I've never had fit and finish issues with anything from them. I'm sure some people have, but again, this continues the tradition in my Kizer ownership journey of having really well done, impeccably finished knives that lock up well, that all really just come together generally with no knocks or burrs or marks on them. There is a small issue that I'll talk about in my negatives that is definitely worth noting, but apart from that, it's not something you'd be able to pick from sight anyway right now. So closing the knife, just all lining up pretty well. Nothing sitting out as being garish or ugly or anything like that. The clip is well machined. The clip blends in with the color of a knife. It's not got a different finish. All very, very uniform and very well done. This portion of the knife in general is done very well. I like the lanyard hole. It could just as well have been filled in, but they've gone ahead and milled it out. So you can put some rope through there if that is your thing. And in fact, this might be a knife that would do well with a colored lanyard or something, just to add a little bit of color to it. But, I'm not a lanyard person. They sort of just irritate me hanging out of my pocket. But definitely a lanyard knife fan's dream, because you can pretty much fit any sort of style of rope or thickness through there because it is quite big and generous as well. And the other thing, of course, is the pocket clip does perform well for this type of pocket clip. It's still not as good as just the standard intuitive Spyderco wire clip, which is my favorite pocket clip of all time. But, that's not the most jazzy looking thing. And when you get a knife like this that is a clearly got an element of artisticness to it, then you can sort of see that a shaped or a specific clip for the knife is perhaps a nice idea. And it carries well enough in the pocket. Again, not as easy to slide over as your standard sprung clip, but just fine. Just because it's not super easy doesn't mean it's super terrible. It's just good, which is no problems with me at all. A couple of other things, they've done it really well with this, so you don't need to worry about where your fingers are, as in being on the lock to unlock the knife. Some knives getting to about this size and smaller, I don't have the one on me, so even this Kizer Gemini, some knives, when you have a smaller frame looking knife, if you put too much pressure on the lock, which sometimes you just do intuitively, it sometimes makes it really hard to open. This one's not too bad either. I've had a couple of zero tolerances that are really sensitive on the lock bar. If you have any sort of, if your grip when you're opening it naturally rests there, you sometimes have to retrain yourself. Even this one here, you have to brake past a bit of extra detent pressure. So it doesn't have that, which is really, really good as well. And I do appreciate that wholeheartedly. All right, in terms of the things that I'm not 100% stoked on with the knife, the first thing is more of a taste thing. I would like a little bit more color on this. So this knife, and the good news is it's fixable, I suppose, at another bit of cost, I guess. This knife is, in my opinion, crying out for an anodization. I'm not particularly that into modifying knives. I don't really have an interest in that, but I think this knife has such good basic design to it. It's a bit like how, it's like how you can get an interesting looking car, but if you just choose it in white, it's not as interesting looking. It's a bit like that. I think this would look really good in like a blue or a red anodization or a yellow or something like that. Would look really, really great in terms of just making it stand out just a little bit more, because the bones are there for it. It's like a really pretty or a handsome person, but they're wearing like, kind of not particularly form-fitting clothing or something like that. It's just that extra little level that I wouldn't have minded they perhaps do some color options, or even if they just perhaps colored the hardware or something, made it look a little bit more vivid, then that would have probably done it for me. But just, I can sort of see how people who are getting titanium frame lock fatigue could very well say, that's just another titanium stonewash, grey Fiesta, which is a totally fair comment, and I definitely would like to see some more colour options when companies do these sorts of things. I know you take a bit of a risk in that you might have a whole bunch of ones in a certain colour that don't sell, but I think it's definitely a risk worth taking. It would really have made this knife stand out a bit more, because as it stands, not that many people have even heard of this knife, and it's one of the better designed knives that have come out this year, in my opinion, and it's got a really good designer behind it. And I think anything that could have done to make it stand out just a little bit more would have certainly been a good thing. Another thing is, just in terms of the factory edge, it's come with a little bit of unintentional recurving, just the tiniest bit. And it will straighten itself out as I sharpen it, because all you do is spend a little bit more time here. It's got a great sharpening choil, and it's definitely thin enough behind the edge to remove just the teeniest bit of material, which is all it is. But just a little thing there, it's a straight line from there onwards, as you can see, but then you see that and it just humps up just a little bit, something to bring up. I know it's minor, but when you start paying $230 for a knife, which is what this cost, I'm going to try and bring everything up that stands out to me. But the main thing is that with just regarding the pivot system, and I know it's different having a thumb stud deploying knife on bearings, I think it's a good choice. It's a cool thing to have. Like, bearings aren't just for flippers, absolutely. But there's a different forces are at work with thumb stud opening, because you generally are using more strength from the human hand to give the knife a kick open. So our flipper is generally just about breaking the detent and the weight of the blade doing the rest. Whereas this one here, you are actually putting a bit of muscle behind it and launching it. So as a result of that, and I'm talking after a fair few opening and closings, but as knife guys, we will do that. We'll sit there and open and close our knife for an hour when we first get it. No worries at all. What I'm thinking is happening is that is causing a little tiny bit of kick, which breaks the absolute, setness of the screw. Like, absolute, the screw, it comes in, it's all really well put together. I think it knocks it loose just teeniest, tiny, talking like nanometers every time, until eventually you do get a tiny little bit of, it's back to being centered now, but I'll run in some footage where it wasn't. It just kind of gets a little bit uncentered, and you just need to get a Torx and tighten it up again. And this is rare, and you're not doing it all day, but I have noticed probably, I've had this knife for a little bit now, and I've noticed that I have to do that every so often. I just notice it. Again, it's minor, but it's just something I'll certainly bring up, because if they can learn from it, maybe just put some blue Loctite in there or something. Not red, don't you put red in there, but some, something to secure those threads a bit more against whatever impact is happening would probably be a great idea. So that's just the only other thing. That's probably the most severe thing I can think to say about this knife, but in general, it's fixable and it isn't the end of the world. So once again, Kizer have knocked it out of the park. Just like the Gemini was one of the best knives from a couple of years ago, this is one of the best knives this year. It's excellent. all the elements work together, both in terms of how good everything is individually, but then they're also united by a sort of common design, vision, I guess you would say, to sound like a complete wanker, but it's true. Like this, it's a properly designed knife. It's not just kind of a rehash, or like just a, this is a big endurer. It's not like a different version of something that already exists. Yeah, it's a titanium frame lock knife, but it's got many points of difference to it that make it, in my opinion, very, very buyable knife. It's got good materials for a good price. It's made by a good company. I mean, there's things about Kizer that aren't quite clear yet, so I'm not sure how well they take care of their customers, if there's issues. I haven't really read into it. I haven't really needed to, because most of the knives I've had are impeccably fit and finished from them, frankly. So I just think this is a must-buy knife. If it speaks to you, if the design speaks to you, and if you can maybe bear having to put a dab of Loctite on there from time to time, or just, making sure it's dialed down and just maintaining the knife, I guess that's what it all comes down to, then there's really no red flags here that I can think of to tell you about. It's just excellent, and I really enjoyed using it and carrying it, and it's become one of my favorite knives already. It's sitting with this knife, and it's sitting with this knife, and it's sitting with this knife, and it's sitting with the 940 and this knife and this knife. It's excellent. It's just really one of a bunch of great knives that are coming out from Kizer, from the knife industry at the moment, and I really do recommend it.